Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Well, today I'd like to do a video that I promised to do a long time ago, and that is showing you how to shrink a Blu-ray rip that you have saved to your hard drive, probably to your Plex server, as I have on right here in front of you. You can see how to shrink one of those videos while still retaining a good amount of the quality. It's not going to look as good as the original, but still looks really good and preserves the resolution and everything. Because you may have an older computer you're using, you might be running a Plex server and something that just has limited storage, and maybe you don't want to upgrade. Maybe you don't know how to upgrade a hard drive, or maybe you don't want to spend the money. You can really increase the number of files you're storing on a hard drive if you reduce the size of these rips, because Blu-ray rips are generally going to be in at 30, sometimes even 40 gigabyte, and that you can run out of hard drive room really quick unless you've got a multiple terabyte hard drive. So it's always a good idea to consider reducing the size of these. You don't want to reduce the quality a lot, but you're going to have to sacrifice some quality. But the end result can still look pretty darn good. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to shrink a Blu-ray rip using Handbrake. Now, Handbrake is a free video encoder, and it's really good. Most everybody, that's what they use now. Years ago, you had all kinds of different encoders out there, and you still have some, but if you know what you're doing, this is the one you want to be using, because best of all, it's free. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So now I'm running this just like my Plex server software is running on Linux. All these programs are going to be on Linux, but Handbrake is also free and available on Windows. So it's not going to look, it's going to look just about the same, but there are some cosmetic differences between the layout, some of the labeling and stuff in the app. I don't know why that is, why they don't look identical. But if you're doing this on Windows, which a lot of you guys are, it's going to look a little bit different. But you should be able to navigate through these options. They're all in there. They just may be slightly different looking, maybe a little bit different location within the same tab. And they might just have a little different name or something goofy like that. But you can do it on Windows, on Linux. Handbrake is just a great converting software. All the benchmarks you see where they test CPUs and that, they always are using Handbrake to, change a 4K file to 1080p and see how fast, this CPU can do it against that. So this is the one you want to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the settings I use, and then give you an idea at the end the difference in quality between the original Blu-ray rip, which is just a one-to-one copy off the disc, just put into an MKV container here, and that's what you can see on the desktop here. The movie is just a movie. I happen to have a disc called Looking for Eric, and this video file is just a one-to-one copy off the Blu-ray disc using Make MKV, which I showed you guys in a video before, how to copy a disc to your hard drive. So if you don't know how to do that, go back on the channel. I only got, this is like the 5th video on the channel, so go back and look. I believe it was the 3rd video on the channel. It shows you how to do that. So go back and look at that if you don't know how. This is going to show you now how to shrink that while maintaining a good amount of the quality, but allowing you to get a lot more files on a hard drive on your Plex server. So first thing I want to show you though is just the size. So I'm going to go to that video file, which I just happen to have on my desktop, and you can see here that it is 32.6 gigabytes. So we'll look and see when we get done with this how much it shrinks it, because generally you can expect sometimes they shrink the video file by down to maybe a 1/5 or sometimes even a 1/6 of the video file. This one could be 8 to 10. I wouldn't expect it to be above 10, but again, it's going to depend on what settings we use and how much audio tracks we preserve and all that stuff, which takes up additional hard drive space. So keep that in mind, but it's not uncommon to shrink one of these down to not a whole lot bigger than a DVD size, and it still is going to look pretty darn good. So I'll show you the video file size when we get done with this. And then, of course, we'll try to do a little comparison on the quality, between this one and the re-encoded one. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up Handbrake, And I'm just going to go to open source. You might be able to drag this over. I'll go open source, and there's looking for Eric. To open it up, and when it does that, you'll see these tabs. It's loaded the video in now, and we're going to look at the summary tab. And I'm going to select inside, and Windows it'll look a little different, but you have your MKV or MP4, I think it says. MPEG 4 they call it here. Mastraska is your MKV. That's what I'm going to use. So I'd select that. Your dimensions you should not have to check. Leave it auto crop, whatever it suggests, leave it. Now this is just a 1080p movie. This would be a little different if you're in a 4K movie. So keep that in mind. We're going to keep it to 1080p. And be mindful this process is not quick. It's going to take a while. And the settings again are going to decide how quick this process will be. And of course the CPU power and stuff. You know, this is just a dual core 4-thread Athlon 3000G. If you have a 5950X, it's going to do this in probably 1/10 the time, maybe. I don't know. It's going to be way faster, but most people are not using a computer like that to run their Plex server. And then filters, don't worry about that. The most important tabs on here are going to be these video, audio, subtitles. A video, this is your most important tab that you're going to look at in Handbrake. And you see video encoder. This is your codec. I suggest H.264. Windows, it may just say X264. This is the most compatible one. This is one that is going to have the least issues if you want a direct stream. That means, if you don't know what that means, direct streaming is sending Plex sends the video out to another device. It doesn't have to change it. It doesn't have to re-encode it. It doesn't require any resources at all on your computer. I mean, maybe 1 or 2% CPU. It does nothing. And when you do that, it just takes a lot of load off Plex. And it on the other end, the device doesn't have to do anything either. It can just accept that stream and go. But not every device will accept all the different codecs. So H.264 is the one I recommend. You can see there's a lot of different options in here. You've got H.265, which I'll discuss more in a minute, and then some of these older ones like MPEG 4, MPEG 2, you don't want to use those. You want to stick with one of these more modern codecs. H.264, again, is going to be most compatible. If you want to go with H.265, that is also fine. It is just it's a newer codec. It is going to produce a little better quality video and a little bit smaller video file. So if you want to get the absolute tiniest file, you want to do that. But it takes a lot longer for the CPU to convert that file. So keep that in mind. That's one reason why I'm trying to do what's the best settings to shrink a video in a reasonable amount of time. So X.265 or H.265 is going to take a lot longer. Now you see these ones here, say 10-bit, and then they have the 10-bit and 12-bit versions for the H.265. This is like for HDR, high dynamic range. Those are your more larger color palette or profiles, and that's for these HDR movies that are going to almost always be in 4K. So you don't need to mess with those unless you're doing like an HDR 4K rip. Then you would need to select those, and 10-bit, 12-bit is going to depend on what type of HDR it has. Or Dolby Vision's another one that you see Netflix uses a lot. That's a even better version of the standard HDR. There's 10 and 12-bit. You don't need to mess with those, so just disregard those. You're going to use this, or you're going to use this. You can see the settings do change. I'm going to again show you guys just for the H.264 codec. And then there's settings in here will adjust that's going to affect the outcome file size and quality, just like on H.264 as well. For frame rate, I always go up here and you're going to select same as source. You don't want to change that. If you don't know the frame rate, typically movies are going to be this 23.976, but it's possible you get a Blu-ray that has a higher frame rate. You don't want to guess. Just do same as source, and it will make sure that it matches it so that everything is synced up and looks properly. So same as source. You can leave this variable or constant frame rate. I think I usually do constant on that. I don't know if they do. Variable frame rate will increase the bit rate for like high motion scenes, but it can ease it up when there's less motion, and that will help make a smaller file. So you could do it, but as it mentions here, variable frame rate's not always supported by certain players. It won't be a problem on a PC. It shouldn't be a problem with Plex, but just for the sake of compatibility potential, just stick with constant. But again, I think that's going to make the file a little bit larger. Then you look over to the right here. You have your quality meter, and they usually tell you here, and it pops up here, that on H.264, I think on Windows it would recommend a 20 to 23 range, but I'm not seeing it pop up here on Linux and say that. The more you go to the right, the better the quality will be over here. But as you get up too high in quality, you're going to, as you get closer to 0, that means lossless, which you have no difference. You could end up with a file that's larger than the original file. You don't want that. So the more you go to the right, or the smaller the number, the better the quality, but also the larger the file size because of that. It's increasing the bit rate is what it's doing. So usually I go with something like 21 or 22. So I'm going to change that a little bit. I'm going to decrease the quality a little. If you go to the left, it's going to make a smaller file, but you're going to really start to drop off in quality as you get down here, and you're going to have really noisy, blocky, cruddy video. So somewhere in that, let's go with the 22. Keep it at constant quality here. You could set a bit rate. We're not going to mess with that. 2-pass encoding. That is looking at it. If you want to set that, it'll analyze the video and then go back and then encode it. That'll help make a smaller file, but that takes a long time. It's going to look at the file, make notes about what should have more bit rate, what should have less, and then it comes back and does the work. 2 passes. It will make a smaller file, but again, it's a lot of work. Down here, though, you have your tuner settings, and down here you can set it for film, animation, grain. For a regular film movie, you probably just want to set it to film, or you can leave it at none. And then your profiles, usually you set that to main. You can also do high. I mean, this stuff I don't know a lot about, but your encoder level, I usually go with 4.1. That's what a lot of them will say. You can go higher, but if you get too high on a level, then you could have playback compatibility issues. So 4.1 is a safe one. Again, I think main is fine. You can do high. This stuff isn't going to make a huge difference. If it's an animated movie, let's say it's a Disney movie or something, I would recommend animation because it's optimized for that. It'll help make a smaller file. But if you're regular films, I think film is fine. Fast decode, I think you can do that. So it says if your device is struggling for playing the output file, but again, that's more for probably a Blu-ray or DVD player, I believe. So that's the settings I would use on this screen. It's been a while since I messed with some of these, because you usually will make yourself a profile. You can save it, and then you just load that profile, and every time you encode, you can load that up, and it will put the video settings, especially audio too, but that usually has to be tweaked. But the video settings will be set properly. So as you can see up here, we have the presets on a 1080p 30, but we've altered this profile, so it's not going to change it. And I can save that. See, it says modified over here. I've modified this basic 1080p. It doesn't really matter what profile you load, as long as you change everything correctly here. Then I can go save this as a new preset, and then save this when I'm done, which I'll probably do, because I haven't done any coding here much at all in a long time since I moved from Windows to Linux. So that's why I don't have a profile saved. I have one saved on my Windows computers because I use this program quite a bit. Now, we're going to move along next to the next important tab, and that is your audio tab. And you can see here we've got a DTS HD Master Audio 5.1 channel track. And there it is there. Now you can add more. There are more tracks, and if I go to add, you'll see here in the drop down I've got a AC3 5.1, and then I've got some 2 channel. I usually like to include another 5.1 channel or even a 2 because it helps increase the it'll make Plex will be less likely to have to re-encode the audio if it can select a different stream that the device it's sending the file to is compatible with. And it's just a little less work, though it's not much work on the computer to re-encode just the audio. That's pretty common. But I have run into problems on when you get to the DTS HD Master audio, I believe it is the really high-end audio. I have noticed problems with videos being out of sync with the lips on a home entertainment system. And if you drop down to something else, it's lower bit rate or not as compressed or doesn't require as much decoding, then that usually syncs up just fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select an AC3 5.1. I probably don't need to go to 2-channel, but you could if you wanted to. And I see surround 5.1. Then you can select what you want to do with the encoder, and we'll go back and do it for the other one too. On all these audios, it's Handbrake by default wants to re-encode the audio to something smaller because it's trying to re-encode everything and make it smaller. I recommend that you do not re-encode your audio so you preserve the best audio quality. And audio, again, doesn't use that much file size, so you're not going to save that much file size by keeping the original audio. As you can see here, it wants to take this AC3 5.1 448 kilobit per second to AAC bit rate of 160 in stereo, which would just be 2 channels. So that's gonna make a huge difference in your audio quality. So what you want to do is go to your encoder. Now on Windows, and I'll start with this track. I closed that with my accident, and we'll go add that one again. But in Windows, you'll have it all here in the menu. I think you can double click on it, or you can click the edit pencil here. This is where you can see there's the DTS HDMA 5.1, and it wants to again downsample this to 2-channel 160. It's going to save file size, but it's going to take a big crap on your audio. So what you want to do is under the encoder, select your DTS HD pass-through. And it's going to gray it out, and that says, you know what? Now it says keep that audio as is, send it straight through, add it to the video, and don't change a thing about it. So click OK, and now we're passed through. Now I'll go back here again, select that other audio track, the AC3, which is a pretty common one, and I'm going to also do AC3 pass through. See? Make sure you click OK, don't click cancel, or it'll default back to downsampling. And there we go. We're going to keep 2 audio tracks. That will make the file larger. If you just want to do one and maybe do the AC3 5.1 to keep it safer, that will make a smaller file. But I like to keep both. That way Plex can determine if Plex picks the wrong one. Let's say it picks the DTS HDMA because my surround sound system can handle it, but I'm getting sync issues or something, then I can go select this other audio track in Plex. And that one will probably may not sound quite as good. It'll be close, but it'll at least probably not have any syncing issues. And then under subtitles, you can go in here and add a subtitle and decide if you want it burned in, forced, where it's physically part of the video file or not. So all I do is go to add, and you can see English PGS, and then you click OK, and there we got it passing through. I don't know what I'm going to delete that one there, the foreign audio scan. And now that the English PGS is just passing through, again, if you double click on it, you can see, you can tell it to force it in, or forced is subtitles are usually used to show subtitles during scenes where someone is speaking a foreign language. So if you watch a show like a Netflix Katla is a TV show where they speak both Icelandic and English in it, and if you're in the United States, it shows subtitles, but when the characters from Sweden and Iceland are talking to each other, they use these English because that's a mutual language they both can understand. Subtitles go away because obviously I can understand that. That's what forced would be. But if you want to burn it in the video, that's going to make it physically part of the video file, and you don't want to do that unless maybe you've got somebody in the house that's hearing impaired and they always will need to have subtitles up. Then you can just make it physically part of the video. So there we go. You can also import stuff, but you just want to embed it in the subtitle list, and it's going to include this text file that tells all of the dialogue in the entire movie along with the times that it needs to show it, and your device knows to show all that stuff. So that's what you do there. And then that's all the settings that I would mess with. You're going to go down, you can save it to a certain location. Right now it's telling me it's going to save it to my video folder on here. I'm going to save it to the desktop again and give it a name. It's different because we can't give it the same name. So I'm going to call it Shrunk, so I know that it's been shrunk. And we're ready to go. So what we're going to do is I'm going to click start, and it's going to take hours and hours to do this. And one thing I remember too, see, do we have this here? That's one thing I skipped. I'm glad I remembered that. We're going to go back to that here in just a second. But when we go to save it, just save it wherever you can, you can find it, and then we're going to compare the file size that we're in when we're done. But one thing I didn't mention here back at the video section, so I apologize I skipped that, is the preset speed. We did the quality and we did these settings, but this is a little different looking than in Windows. It's down here. I like to go up to slow. The slower you go to the right, just like the quality, this is telling you how fast to analyze the video. The slower you go, the better the quality and the smaller the file size, but the longer it takes. So if you go up really high here, super fast, you're going to end up with a pretty large file that's not going to look so great, but it'll get done pretty quick. It defaults to medium. I like to go with slow or slower. Let's go with slower. You can go to very slow and placebo, where it's like, it's going to take it a year, but it'll get the smallest file size possible. So I like slow or slower. So I apologize I didn't mention that a while ago. I'm kind of doing this off the cuff, so I should have told you guys that when I was on this tab. But if you watch this video through, you obviously catch it here. So slow or slower. Let's go. If you're not worried about time, go as slow as you can take it. So I'm going to go slower. If I wanted to get this, I got to have this thing done in a couple hours, so I'm going to go much quicker. Well, you have to be okay with the video not looking so great. So slower or slow is a 2. Now we're ready to go press start. So I'm glad that I remembered that. Don't leave it on medium. That's going to get a bigger file, and it's going to not look as good. So we're just going to press start, and then to the magic of editing, you guys will be able to come back here and we'll be all done, and you'll be able to compare them. So we'll be right back. Alright guys, I'm back. I let this run overnight, so it took a very long time, as I told you it would. It was sometime the following morning before it was finished. But again, remember that this is a dual-core 4-thread Zen Plus processor. If I had done this on my 5600X Zen 3-based system, it would have probably done it in a fifth of the time. That's 6 cores, 12 threads, in a much newer processor, so it's just much faster. So anyway, it's all finished. Again, I wasn't really concerned about speed. And I've got both the files here on my desktop. The original here, which I'll show you guys again, was 32.6 gigabytes. And here is the shrunk file, which is, voila, 8.8. So a little rough math, you're looking at, about a fourth of the file size, roughly. Now we just need to compare it to see how they look side by side. I found a really dark scene, so I've got 2 different players open here. I've got VLC and the built-in video player for Linux. I'm just going to start playing both of these. They won't be identical because I have to press play on each one separately, but they're going to be very close. Just look to see if you see any blockiness. I'm actually really impressed with the I'll make this a little bit bigger here. I'm really impressed with the just how it looks. I mean, I'm just like, usually I end up with a little bit of more blockiness, but I can't see it much here. Now, one thing to keep in mind before I start playing it is this is a screen recording at 30 frames per second. That should be fine, but the screen recorder I'm using here on Linux says it's not a real high quality, and there's not a way to really adjust like the bitrate for that. So what I'm getting at is what you're seeing here in this YouTube video is not going to do justice for what I'm looking at. It's going to be lower quality, both because of the screen recorder I'm using and because YouTube will always recompress and take a crap on anything you upload as well. So especially in 1080p. So we'll play both of these. You guys can just get an idea though, because if there's any kind of big blockiness or something, you're going to still be able to see it in the screen recording. So let me go ahead and start the original file, and then start the re-encode here. I mean, that looks really good. So there you have it, guys. I mean, that is a really good quality rip. You know, we re-encoded it. It dropped the bit rate, and it also took some of those audio tracks out to save space. And at the end of the day, we end up with a 1/4 size video file that looks really, really good and gives you a lot more space on your Plex server to do this on other video files. So that's pretty much it, guys. Much smaller file. Give you guys the settings that I like to use, and be sure that you remember to set that quality to very slow or slow, because I skipped past that accidentally when I initially looked at the video tab, but then I caught it at the end of that first part of the video. So if you skipped ahead on this and you didn't see that, just make sure that you set your slider in the video tab to slow or slower. Okay, guys, I think otherwise that wraps up this video. I appreciate you guys for checking out the channel. I'll try to post as much stuff as I can coming up. So if you're new to the channel, click that subscribe button, and while you do it, click the bell so you're notified every time I upload a new video, which hopefully will be a lot more often than it was in the past. And as always, guys, have a wonderful day.